Good morning, it's April 27th. This is to my liberal friends. Foreign policy is one area that's primarily within the purview of the executive branch. The president guides the direction of that policy and uses the Department of State and Department of Defense as the primary implementers of his policy. Under Joe Biden, it's been difficult to determine exactly what is the policy. He seems to make it up on the fly with starts and abrupt endings without any rhyme or reason. The problem with it is there's lacking a clear and decisive foreign policy is that it leaves the world guessing, and especially the allies of the United States, about whether they can rely upon the leader of the free world. Allow me to give you a few examples. The first and most visible blunder was in Afghanistan. The bungled pullout from Afghanistan was a kind of foreign policy disaster that can define an entire presidency as inept. Joe Biden made things worse by trying to mislead the American public about what the military recommended he do. The president claimed in an interview that his top advisors did not tell him he should keep a force of 2,500 Americans in the country. Yet at a September 28th Senate Armed Services Committee hearing, General Milley contradicted this story, saying, "I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan." The result of this mismanaged withdrawal left 13 servicemen and women as fatalities. The administration decided to use the airport in Kabul instead of the more defended one at Bagram Air Base, and this opened the door for the suicide bomber that penetrated the airport. Then we should look at the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Previously, the United States, under both President Obama and Trump, had blocked the deep-sea pipe-laying operation, only to have it resumed just days after President Biden took office. He ignored a European Parliament resolution earlier that month that called for an immediate halt of the construction. The pipeline makes Western Europe more reliant on Russian gas. Ukraine, which used to be a major energy transit state, will become less secure as the pipeline replaces the capacity that used to run through its pipeline networks. It will free Russia to continue its coercive campaign and occupation of Ukrainian territory and to threaten other bordering states without their energy markets playing into the decision. The Biden's policy toward both Iran and China have vacillated back and forth with no coherent policy goals. The president's budget request for the U.S. Navy, a critical service in the competition with China, would cut purchases of ships by $700 million and propose to retire current systems at a rate that would shrink the overall fleet. Purchases of combat aircraft would be cut by $3 billion, and the budget did away with the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. After the White House released its budget, military commanders submitted a list of programs that they say are needed but not funded. In marking up the defense authorization bill, the Senate overwhelmingly adopted an amendment that added $25 billion to the defense budget to meet the needs of our commanders in the field. It's critical that Congress take up this legislation quickly as possible, but Democratic leader Chuck Schumer is giving no indication when the bill will move forward. This inaction keeps Beijing a green light to keep threatening our allies. After Russia invaded Ukraine, Biden seemed to be in a fog. He even said that a minor incursion would be okay. He delayed sending the needed weapons to Ukraine. This included their air defense systems to defend against Russian airstrikes. It includes missile defense systems. He prevented NATO allies from providing Ukraine needed military aircraft to try and match Russian air attacks. And laughably, he asked the Germans to send their Leopard tanks to Ukraine while he has deferred on sending the U.S. M1 Abrams tank. The results were that Russia was able to advance much further than they would have, and despite the courageous fighting by the men and women of Ukraine, Russia still has a strong foothold in their country as we move into the second year of the war. What we are witnessing is foreign policy amateurism. When it comes time to staff up the positions within the foreign policy arena, the administration turned not to seasoned veterans, but instead to amateurs who they owed some form of political fealty. The White House has the responsibility to fill roughly 4,000 senior jobs throughout the departments and agencies. When it comes to roles concerning foreign policy and defense, such appointees from outside the executive branch often have more experience in academia, law firms, or in business than in the front lines of world affairs. But they consider themselves experts when they assume positions, and the disastrous policies they bring forth cause the nation and all of us harm. Last week we saw another foreign policy decision that seemed rooted more in domestic political policy than what should be done. The civil war in Sudan has been waging for several years, and this week the U.S. evacuated its diplomats from Khartoum. But just like in Afghanistan, they left behind hundreds of Americans who simply had to scramble to find ways to exit the city and country. They contacted the U.S. government and were told they were on their own. I bring this up because I have a grandson in the 82nd Airborne based at Fort Bragg. They were put on alert to be deployed to Sudan to assist in the evacuation and to more than likely protect a crucial airfield. They were required to get the gear necessary for what is called a pack list of what they would need for an extended stay. On Monday, they were preparing to leave when one of the final things to be done before leaving is the issuance of weapons. If the United States... That was until the order came down to stand down. I suspect this was because the White House was about to release the video announcing Joe Biden would run for a second term. And they could not run the risk of sending U.S. troops to Sudan and have Biden be forced to make a trip to Delaware, not to his Wilmington home or beach house, but to Dover Air Force Base to receive the bodies of U.S. troops that might be fatalities in the conflict. Not a good look for his campaign, and that's what's dictating our foreign policy. It's been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, hit the subscription button and recommend it to your friends.